everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Life Actually podcast. I'm your host, Maria Lopes, and I hope you're having a good day. Today, I'm joined by Lyndon Balcaran, or known to me as Uncle Lyndon.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. And you want to tell our 3 viewers a little about yourself?
Well, my name is Lyndon Balcaran. I'm a husband, father, leadership student, and I use the posture of student because I think that once you're part of leadership, you're always learning. I work in corporate Trinidad as well, and I'm also a pastor. So it's multiple hats that I wear, so I'm happy to be a part of the conversation today.
That seems like a lot.
It is.
I would definitely crack under the pressure of just one of those, so definite kudos. So I thought today, for our first episode, we could talk about your favorite subject. Yeah, and that is the wayward way young people are today.
So we would, and so I'm happy to join our conversation because I think even in terms of the narrative is changing, right? And I think a story is important based on whose side you're hearing the story from, So yeah, let's jump into it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had because I feel like there's such a disparity between each generation, and we could all think that, we're the best generation and there's so many wrong with the one below us or the one on top of us. So yeah, I feel like of course you're a lot older than me, so yeah, you're like super old.
Yeah, I'm super old, but I counted my grades. I got counted as wisdom, so I use that as the excuse. I rock it like that. I'm not gonna dye my hair. I'm gonna rock my grades.
Yeah, and that's definitely the best way to be. Just own it.
Definitely.
Yeah, so just to be open to the conversation, even though we might have such different views, I feel like is so important. So to kick things off, what do you think is the most noticeable difference between Gen Z and say millennials or Gen X? Like, of course, with being a youth pastor, you'd obviously be like right up close and personal with those differences.
So one of the main things I saw between my generation and your generation is the fact that even though you all are so connected, you all are also disconnected, right? To the point where Gen Z have been categorized as a silent generation, right? So in our generation, it was clear. So you either call an extrovert or introvert, right? So you're that person who loves to connect with people and you're out and about, so that extroverted side of it. Or you're introvert, so you prefer to keep to yourself. And it's almost kind of clear lines in terms of who this person is in front of you. But your generation now, you have no idea who this person is. Because when I interact with you in person, and I interact with you online, it's almost like if I'm talking to 2 different people, So that's one of the things that I find is very, very interesting. And even in terms of like millennials, for example, they call us digital pioneers and they call you all digital natives. So you all, that is your space, So to me, that part of it was a very interesting dynamic that really creates some separation between the 2 of us. And the inability to navigate that space is what prevents healthy communications and community between your generation and my generation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think in many ways, even though we might consider it a weakness or a flaw of that generation, that they can't really socialize in an in-person social setting, do you think that there's actually any sort of advantage to be able to communicate on an online domain so clearly and so well? Because I know a lot of kids my age would say that they value their online friends a lot more than their in-person relationships, and they're a lot more fulfilling to them in that way.
Yeah. I think the reality is, and let's be honest, right? Having conversations, being present in person is more challenging, right? It's easier to do it behind a screen. The pressure isn't there. Communication is 93% non-verbal, right? When you're communicating online, you can really focus on your words and you can try to be very, very particular about what you want to say. So if I see a Gen Z in person and I say, "How are you?" The response is, "I'm good. I'm normal."
And most of the time it's not true.
And most of the time it's not true. But if we are able to now have a conversation on WhatsApp, on Discord, or in your space, right now I'm literally looking at voice. I have a 7-minute voice note, right, in my inbox right now, chatting with someone who, when I saw them in person and I asked, how were you? The response was, I'm okay. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a flaw, but it's to understand how the generation works well and how to tap into it. But they also have to be able to function in the social interaction with people, because when they go into the job space, right? I've seen a lot of persons, even at the bank, when I interview persons, on paper, they're solid, right? But when they sit in front of me and I'm interviewing them for the job that they want, that they've worked hard for, they fall apart.
Yeah.
They can't answer simple questions when they know how to, right? Had I done that interview online, it would have been a totally different space. So it's really for that generation to also be aware of their shortcomings and start to build some muscle in that space as well.
Yeah, and I feel like the screen is a mask in many ways as well, because even myself, like if I'm texting someone or sending a voice note, I can think a lot more about my words, like you said, and I feel a lot more comfortable doing that. Like my mind is a lot more connected.
Correct.
Or collected, I should say.
Yeah, and then think about it too. You will record a voice note, right? And then you play it back, right? And if you don't like how it sounds, you delete it.
Yeah.
And you start it over again. When you're in person, chatting with someone, there isn't that delete and reset. You understand? So sometimes that kind of, and again, the ability to build that muscle in that space in terms of human conversations, I think is a major gap and deficiency that I've seen. And while there is a movement towards the digital space and for them to be able to navigate that space, that's fine. The in-person is a major thing that they continue to struggle with.
Yeah, and since you use the word deficiency, yeah, it goes without saying that the way Gen Z socializes is different, for want of a better word. But do you think there's any area, could be a broad answer, that you say they excel in?
Oh, definitely. I think the ability, they are agile learners. The Gen Z, they're able to take on so much information and process it that will even challenge millennials and Gen Xers for sure. Think about your grandmother asking you to simply download an app, right? And the major challenges they have to just navigate that space. That's normal for you all, right? So the ability to take on information and the ability to process multiple bits of information at the same time, that's a massive strength. But sometimes, even that same thing, there's a bit of an overload. And while they're trying to process this mountain of information, it kind of causes paralysis and procrastination in terms of decision making, because you want to absorb as much information as you can before you make a decision. Our generation didn't have all that information towards us. We had to go to the library and find a book and read about it and then figure it out. So I think that's one thing that you'll have to kind of be able to navigate as well, in terms of how to process the information and then sometimes make a decision based on the information that you have as well.
Yeah, and it's definitely interesting that you brought that up, because I feel like even with the internet, there's so much comparison, and the paralysis that you talked about, the comparison, it cripples people from doing anything, because in their mind, there will always be someone better than them.
And I always talk about, and as a common term as well, the analysis paralysis, right? So you overthink something before you begin to move into it, as opposed to having that pioneering spirit, right? In terms of, let me try it, let me jump into the water, let me see what it is. And that's actually what they say about your generation as well, that you're pragmatic, right? That you'll focus more on practical than theoretical. But then you're also sucking information as well. So it's kind of like, what's happening, you know? Jump in, try it, and see in terms of how it works out. But I think that when you are surrounded by the Zuckerbergs of our time and what the success that they have been able to accomplish, that success can become very intimidating too.
Yeah, and definitely access to information is at an all-time high. So the average teenager from now to one, say, 20 or 30 years ago, has more of a chance of doing something they love or being successful in the world just because of the amount of information that they have access to.
Definitely, but again, and I'll say that is you have the information to make an informed decision, so you know exactly what I need to do. So where the previous generations may have been doing things in the dark, right? Taking a chance on it. And if you ask them why you made a decision, it was a gut feeling. I had this feeling that I was going to go this way. Now, people are making the decision because of the information or this podcast or this YouTuber or this person. They got it from there. There are things we can take example from, right? But at the same time, I think it's important for you guys to take a leap of faith and see how it works out. Be pragmatic, leverage your strength.
Yeah. And that's definitely good advice, and one that I'll take to heart even as I go forward with this podcast.
Definitely.
So, as I'm feeling more motivated, the question's coming to my mind right now. Since you work with a lot of kids, young adults in your volunteer work in church and that kind of thing, being a youth pastor, because of that same immeasurable void of information, of course, anything that's supposed to be motivational to someone my age can easily come off as cliche, or someone's already said it. So what do you think is your way of reaching out to that generation and finding a way to motivate and inspire them?
So one thing I realized about your generation as well, and I keep talking about you guys, and let me say this, I believe in you guys. I think you all are one of the most powerful generations that ever touched the earth. I think that you all were born for a time like this. When you make a stand, nothing is going to shake you guys or shape you to move in a different direction. And that actually altered my approach in terms of working with you guys, because initially, because of how I learned, I was taught this is what it is, and you do it, it was black and white, there was no gray, right? When our parents said, don't cross your road, that was it, right? You don't ask the question why, right? And if you were brave enough to ask the question why, the response would have been, because I said so.
Because I said so.
Right? And that was good enough for us, right?
Not for me.
Not for you guys, right? You all would say, why not cross your road? And chances are the persons who are saying don't cross your road didn't even know why fully we did not cross your road. And because there's a lack of information as well, and you already have 10 reasons why you should cross your road, that's where the challenge happens with the generations as well, right? So what I realized, and my approach has been to not give the verdict, but give the information and put the decision in the person's hand. So I'm just providing the information and creating a space for honest and open conversation. And then when you make the decision, I let you know the consequences and the benefits of the decision that you make. And at the same time, even though you know they're going to make a mess, you have to be able to allow. I had to learn to give them the space to make the mess and then be there to support them through the mess.
Right.
You understand? Because some persons, again, in our generation, they're saying some people have to burn to learn.
Yeah, for sure.
And now it breaks my heart to see them burn, because if you had just done what I told you to do, you know? But same thing, just creating a platform for learning to happen and creating a platform for decisions we made, and that was my switch. I must say there are some persons that work well, some it doesn't, but I have to always be able to be in a space to help walk through the journey, whichever decision that they do make.
Yeah, definitely a process that will require a lot of patience.
Patience and being able to not want to grab them out of the fire, because maybe just a learning experience as well. But always let them know that there's a safe space. And I've learned to never say, I told you so. You know? Just
to fight that urge sometimes.
Well, definitely, but again, it's because I guess because I'm getting older, and as a father as well, you kind of think long term. You don't just take the short route to the end. You create a space to walk a whole journey out, and at the end of it, they would come back and say, you know, what you say make real sense, and I should have listened to you. So they are actually ones who say it, you know? But again, it's just the ability to create a space for the honest and open conversations to happen as we move the thing forward.
Yeah, and speaking of leadership, I know recently you would have launched your Hit Refresh Leadership Conference. I mean, I was just there making the name tags, and By the way, whoever is out there who is thinking of giving your kid a super complicated name, do the world a favor and just name your kid Bob.
No, man. That's fun. That's fun. That's the fun part
For
of it.
Starbucks workers and name tag makers everywhere, you are doing us a favor. But anyway, mini tangent over. The impact of the conference for me was instantaneous. Like, I walked out of there definitely with a new perspective, and it's one that needed to come to me at that specific time in my life. So I just wanted to ask, what's your vision for that new initiative? Do you plan to do more stuff like that in the future?
Yeah, so definitely, I think coming out of the pandemic, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about a land that was good on the surface, but the water was bad. Now, if the land is good and the water is bad, it's only a matter of time before the land gets bad as well. So, leaders coming out of the pandemic and being called to return to pre-pandemic roles and function responsibilities without being repaired and being refreshed and being restored and re-energized is going to cause the land to get bad. So, the Hit Refresh project was really to help leaders reset. You know, like a website that's buffering, and you just click that reset button a few times for just to get back to normal. That's what our project is, and we will continue doing it in different spaces. We may continue. Our hope is to take it up to the islands as well, and just have a space for that kind of conversation happen, and then build a community on the other side of it to help persons walk through that. So yeah, we intend to keep doing it. And even for us, it was like an icebreaker or like a shake in preparation for some things that are coming as well. So excited to see how that whole story evolves, because we hope to be an intervention, a proactive intervention to leaders, help them walk through their journeys going forward.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see where it goes to, and make sure check out my Uncle Lyndon's Instagram page. Lots of great conversations, lots of new enlightenment, and of course to keep posted on what's going on with that.
Definitely.
So I saved the most hard-hitting question for last because I know the answer can potentially be quite harsh. I mean, depending on your view of it. So you of course promote the idea that anyone has the potential to be a leader, right? So, but do you think that some people are ultimately not meant to be leaders and are meant to be followers?
So I remember, fantastic question, right? And I think that is a national debate, is an international conversation, is a philosophy that sits underneath the recruitment process when persons are being evaluated for leadership roles in organizations or nations as a whole, right? And it's really anchored in a simple question: are leaders born or are leaders made? Right? And I remember early in my leadership journey, I would simply say explicitly, leaders are made. Leaders are born, sorry. Either you have it or you don't have it, right? And as I learn, and that's what I said in the beginning, that I've adopted the posture of being a student of leadership. And I've read, and I continue to read a lot of leadership material as well, right? And that narrative that leaders are born is actually a traditional or an old and almost obsolete philosophy. So in previous times, people were selected to lead based on their height, their physical stature. Women weren't ever allowed to be in leadership roles, so your gender as well played a part of it. And when that philosophy is that you're born with it or you're not, right? Now, what I personally believe is that persons have innate leadership potential that will give them the edge over another person who may not have those attributes. And I also believe that leadership is a spiritual call as well. However, if you take a leader with natural abilities, you take a person who doesn't have that natural leadership abilities, who will actually shy away from a crowd, who doesn't want to work with people and prefer to work by themselves, and you train both of them, it's possible that the leader who doesn't have the innate abilities but they are trained, they will outperform the leader who has natural abilities who isn't trained. So my philosophy is simple: great leaders are made. And they have to submit a training process, they have to submit their development process as well. And so anyone, you know how Ratatouille, I think Gusto said anyone can cook. I personally believe that anyone can lead, but they have to have the right support to be able to truly leverage that potential that they have and harness what I call leadership potential.
Yeah, and that's something I've always firmly believed, not just for leadership, but any sort of skill or talent. Like, there's always the question of hard work versus innate talent. And of course, I always believe that with a hardworking mindset and a willingness to learn, anybody who didn't have natural talent will easily triumph someone who did have natural talent. But back to the leadership thing. So you are saying that based on people's mindsets, ultimately there are shepherds and there are sheep in this world. I mean, that's a really bad way of putting it.
Yeah, that's a bad way of putting it. That's a bit rough, right? And again, I think it's about perspective, right? So in this fantastic read by Jim Collins, Good to Great, and that's a fantastic book. I think that every person who's even thinking about leadership, they need to read, right? And in that book is actually a research project. And they studied companies who made the shift from good to great. And one of the things that was a major revelation in that research is that the persons who were leading those organizations were not the people they expected to be in those roles. They didn't have charisma. They weren't strong persons. And some of those things that the persons, they were shy, laid back, but they were passionate about certain things. So it's even in terms of that narrative of a sheep, you know, and I think that as an individual, an individual has to be able to go between lion and sheep. There are moments that you'll have to have that docile, calm, passive approach, and then there are times you have to be lion. So me, for example, I think I'm a natural lion, right? I'm more assertive, I'll run to the front of the room, but I also have to learn to be sheep and learn to be still and learn to listen, you know? So I think that the both ends of the spectrum are important, and based on what is happening, and even Ken Blanchard as an academic and leadership, he advanced the model of situational leadership. So sometimes the lion works, sometimes the sheep is needed. So it's about knowing what is needed and to be able to always operate from that posture of service, which most times is sheep. So, interesting conversation.
Definitely, and of course, since you brought up the lion and the sheep analogy, I feel like an important aspect of being a good lion is learning when to be a sheep.
Definitely.
And how to make the best use of the sheep at your disposal, because at the end of the day, some people just won't be good in a leadership role, but if you can recognize the talent and the potential that they have and make the best use of it, you're doing the best for yourself and for them.
And I think even as that narrative, you have to come back and ask the question, what is a leader? What is leadership? And those questions, we don't take the time to answer correctly. When we talk about if someone is a good leader or a bad leader, what we're really trying to say is if you like them or not. If I like you, I don't like you, right? And you ask a person, they will ill speak different leaders and ask them why. Right? And most times the answers to those questions can be clearly articulated, right? Leadership is a simple definition. Leadership is the art of motivating and mobilizing people towards the attainment of a shared goal. So if you are moving persons towards the achievement of a goal, you are leading. If you are motivating people and helping people on that journey, you are leading. So it's not simply the persons who are in front, behind the podium, or behind a pulpit, or behind a platform. It's not only that. It's about helping people move towards a goal. You know, so I think we have to change our whole narrative and get clarity around leadership is as well, before we start to determine who fits and who doesn't.
Yeah, I feel like we don't even have that clear definition in most organizations, because like in school, for example, like any sort of selective process to select a leader was a joke, because ultimately they're just going to choose whoever's the most popular. It's a popularity contest. Most
popular, most charismatic, someone who has the following. And again, because we look at leadership through the traditional lens, we miss great leaders who are sitting there who have potential, but they may be silent. So you have to have the eyes to identify leadership potential and then create the environment for persons to walk it through. And then, because they may not have the innate drive, it may take longer.
Right.
They may not even run after it. They may say, no, that's not for me, and shy away from it. But you have to keep the lens in terms of, I see a potential, and I'm going to wait to see when you're ready, and I'm here to help.
Yeah, and I feel like in most cases, the people that would make the best leaders are the ones that don't want the leadership position.
Well, definitely, because they will do it with integrity, and their motives will be right. It's not about being seen, it's not about being famous. It's about helping persons navigate their journey. And one of the things that we always talk about, so if someone wants to ask me, what is the greatest deficiency in the world? I wouldn't say love, I wouldn't say peace. I would actually say leaders. Leadership, good leadership, is the greatest deficiency in the world. I know what I've realized recently. The reason why there's a great deficiency in leaders is because there's an even greater deficiency in developers of leaders.
Right.
You don't have persons who are simply focused on developing leaders. They're willing to do it in the background, they do it silently, and even persons who have the potential to be leaders to submit to that kind of developmental part and invest in it.
The Mr. Miyagi's of the world.
Oh, we need leadership, Mr. Miyagi's. Wax on, wax off, right? Is needed, and we need leaders to submit to the posture of student as well, and say, can you teach me? Can you help me get better? Can you help me lead better? Because when leaders get better, the organizations or whatever they're leading gets better as well.
Right. Yeah, just gotta let it all sink in, the amount of quality info.
And then your generation needs that because they need inspiration and they need community. What you will need, because of the pragmatic nature, you will need someone to believe in. It's not just something to believe in. You will want to see someone invest your life into a cause and make sure that you are moving in that. So once leaders start to rise up in that generation, you now begin to harness the potential, the innate potential, the dormant potential that's there, and really see massive impact on the earth.
Yeah, you're definitely right about Gen Z. Well, people in general, but mostly Gen Z, like having the longing to rally behind a cause they believe in. And I definitely could get deeper into it, but we will be here for another hour.
Maybe come back sometime and jump into it.
We'll have a part 2. But for now, thank you so much for joining me, for being the pioneer for the Life Actually podcast. I definitely appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
So thank you so much for joining me and Uncle Lyndon on this conversation about leadership and crappy young people, but also the potential they have. Be sure to be on the lookout for our next episode. So thank you and good night.